I think it's been quite extraordinary, but on the one hand, I'm not really surprised. As you say, having sort of been looking and involved in this space for some time, I think there has always been a desire for some sort of civil rebellion and have someone as a leader. So in a lot of ways, Thunberg is really delivering on what a lot of people have been looking for a long period of time.
We all know about the emotion. We all understand that people should be concerned about the planet, but the picture that she portrays is a planet where people are dying already, where there is doom and gloom, where the planet will be lost in 10 years. Is there any basis, in fact, for her style of alarmism?
Well, I think she's got a very simple message and she cuts through. But unfortunately, in this area, there's often a wide gulf between the science and the politics. And what we're really seeing playing out with Greta Thunberg and a lot of the theatre is the politics rather than the science. And the documents that are released by the IPCC, they are extremely detailed, and as a result of that, they cover a very wide spectrum of possible outcomes. And what you see in the political front is people cherry-pick the worst possible case scenarios, exaggerate them a bit, and then catastrophise. And that's certainly what Greta Thunberg has done and how she's based her message.
Well, to watch her giving her key speech, it's painful, awkward to watch. You can see how traumatised she is. Are you surprised that so many adults, including world leaders, leaders of various national governments, have private audiences with her, listen to her, seem to accept her as some sort of wise participant in the debate rather than someone who's just drumming up this emotion?
Well, I'm sort of perhaps been around long enough to think that they're giving her an audience because they want to, by association, achieve other political objectives. And I think that the response to her address at the UN has been interesting in that she was embraced by the French president and others, and immediately after that speech she basically sued the French government for not doing enough. And Macron was quite surprised at that and felt offended by it. And if this continues, I think people are going to become a little bit warier on how they do approach and hitch their star to what's going to take place in this whole space with Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion and other movements that are really pushing the boundaries for action.
Now, you mentioned the latest IPCC reports, Graham. Now, you do dig into them, you do read the detail, you do report what conflicting experts discuss in this area. Does it surprise you, or what are your thoughts looking on at your contemporaries in the media, the amount of attention they'll pay to someone like Greta Thunberg compared to the amount of focus they'll put into the detailed reports?
Well, I think it's symptomatic of reporting in the whole area generally, really. It's much easier to catastrophise and to exaggerate than it is to really get an appreciation for the detail. And I think the politics of it has been not to leave room for nuance, because the objective is to try and move public sentiment and public action. In my view, that tends to be counterproductive. And it's a great shame, in my opinion, that there isn't a more, I think, focused discussion on what the reports are saying and what the real global politic of this whole area is all about.
Yeah, look, I'd be critical of the media on this because I think they polarise it. You have alarmists at one level and sort of climate denial at the other, and they miss out everything in between. But in some ways that's being unfair on the media, because this is the way the political players tend to treat this whole issue. Do you think we're not getting enough politicians from either the centre-left or the centre-right focusing on practical solutions and practical discussion of the issues? They do see it as a binary issue.
I think it's played politically very much as a binary issue. And there seems to be a real lack of willingness to find a common ground on it. And if there's ever, I think, with the energy policy is a good example, the further that the government moved to try and accommodate some of the Labor positions. Labor would move further to the left, and reaching a consensus position was not possible. And that really characterises how the climate debate has played out, and it doesn't really lend itself to making good long-term policy that would probably make things easier in the long run.
Yeah, much of this happens, of course, through the UN, which makes political processes incredibly difficult to predict or assess. But tell us about this latest UN climate summit. Are there going to be any outcomes from this that are going to be useful either in terms of tackling climate change and carbon dioxide emissions, or just in setting up a decent framework for research, debate and consideration of options?
Well, I think you'd have to say that the most recent meeting in New York has been all about the politics. It was called by the Secretary General after US President Donald Trump said that he was withdrawing the US from the process. And it was really called as a special meeting for other countries to show that they weren't going to follow the US, they were going to increase their ambition, they were going to do more. And really, at the end of the day, that's not what happened. There was a big show with Greta Thunberg. There was a lot of emotion. But if you look at the practical outcomes, China said that it's not going to change its position that it had already agreed, and that is to keep increasing emissions until 2030. India said it'll build a bit more renewables, but it's not going to close down any of its coal or slow down the coal that's being built. The US didn't address the meeting, and look, there's way over half the world's emissions among those three, and there was no progress at all. And I think one of the things that's underappreciated about the UN process and about climate change is it really is a proxy for a much bigger agenda. And a lot of the parties at the UN, they see climate change as a way to redress some of the historical wrongs that they perceive from the West or the developed world to the developing world. And a lot of effort goes into seeing how those old scores can be evened up. And climate change provides a pretty handy vehicle to pursue that.
Spot on, Graham. Just briefly, how much longer do you think we're going to be having this massive debate in global politics and media discussion?
Well, I think this is going to be an enduring discussion, and I'm really think if there is going to be a wholesale redrawing of the industrial world, that's going to take a long time to play out. If it all goes wrong, it's going to have long consequences that will be quite dramatic and painful. So this is not going anywhere quickly.
All power to you, Graham, for trying to pick your way through it day in, day out.